Hi there, my name is John or Jonathan Lai. I'm a research analyst here at the Edmonton Arts Council. And today, myself and my colleague Abby Burbank will be providing you a recorded presentation here of the survey project presentation that was presented live to an audience on January 15th. But before I begin, I would just like to acknowledge the land where I am today here at the Edmonton Arts Council offices, located in Treaty 6 territory, Métis Region 4 in Amishwaki, the city of Edmonton. We would like to recognize that this is the historical land for First Nations such as the Cree, Dene, Stoney, Saulteaux, Niitsitapi, as well as the Métis and Inuit people. In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, it is important to understand the values of the numbered treaties and the role that they play in Canadian history. And just to give you a bit of an overview of the presentation that we had previously delivered, I'll first begin by providing a little bit of an overview of the Edmonton Arts Council. I'll then provide more information about the EAC's approach to research, and then I'll be getting into the survey findings from the public survey, and Abby will be presenting on the artists and organization survey findings. And throughout this discussion, we'll incorporate some of the feedback, comments, and questions that we heard during the live session. We'll incorporate that into what we present to you today. So just to begin, I'll just provide a short overview of the EAC's vision and mandate. The EAC envisions that Edmonton is a city where arts and culture are integrated in all aspects of our community life and where both individual artists and arts organizations are valued and supported in their endeavors to create, communicate, and contribute. The EAC's mandate is that we are a non-profit society and charitable organization that supports and promotes the arts in Edmonton. To those ends, we build partnerships to strengthen our community, invest in Edmonton organizations and individual artists through municipal, corporate, and private funding, provide expert advice to government and other agencies on issues that affect the arts, and create awareness amongst Edmontonians about the quality, variety, and value of artistic work produced in our city. And so I'll just tell you a little bit about Connections and Exchanges, a 10-year plan to transform arts and heritage in Edmonton. It's a 10-year plan which received the Cultural Planning Award in 2022 from the Creative City Network of Canada. And we're really proud of this award, certainly because of the consultation that was involved with the community as well in shaping this document. This strategic plan guides us as well as our partners, Arts Habitat Edmonton and Edmonton Heritage Council, with the plan to infuse culture, arts, and heritage into every aspect of civic fabric here in Edmonton. The plan is guided by 3 ambitions, 8 aims, and 55 actions to drive that progress. And next, I'll turn here just to give you a little bit of an overview of the work Abby and I do here in the Edmonton Arts Council Research Office. So this office was established in 2020. It was actually one of the actions outlined in Connections and Exchanges. And our role is to help support strategic planning and decision-making, including tracking progress on the Connections and Exchanges strategic plan. And so there's that old adage, if you're looking to measure or determine progress, you have to be able to track how far you come, how that progress is measured. And we do so using a variety of research methods, such as case studies. Depending on our research questions, we may employ focus groups, semi-structured interviews. We do environmental scanning, as well as surveys, which is another big part of the research methods that we employ. And that'll be the focus of our presentation today. So part of the goals of conducting our surveys are to monitor how well EAC is working towards its mandates and help inform the arts community. As I had mentioned before, it allows us to help track progress that we've made on the Connections and Exchanges plan. And it's also a source of information that we use to supply the EAC board and leaders with evidence that informs EAC policy development, program evaluation, and strategic planning. The surveys also give us a broad overview of arts ecosystem indicators here in the city, of which there are many different categories and concepts, but we'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about the survey findings. And just for more information, the information that we're presenting to you today are drawn from the annual survey reports, which can be found on our website here. As well, a couple other pieces of research that you might find valuable is the Spotlight on Arts Audiences. This is being conducted by Stone Olafson, a market research firm in Calgary, in partnership with the Rose Foundation, the Edmonton Arts Council, along with the Alberta Foundation for the Arts, Edmonton Community Foundation, Calgary Community Foundation, and Calgary Arts Development have sponsored this research to get a better sense of the consumer behavior kind of research and knowledge as to where arts audiences are in terms of their arts and cultural participation. So there's been 3 waves of those survey from last year, 2024, and there'll be another 3 waves being conducted this year. So if you'd like more information about some of the decision-making factors between audiences, you know, some characteristics in what goes into their decision-making in attending arts and culture events, shows, that kind of thing, please feel to check out that information online. And another piece of research I'd like to highlight is the Arts Community Pulse Survey. This is research that has been done by the Canada Council for the Arts. And what they've done is they conducted a survey with arts organizations, artists, individuals who have applied for grants to the Canada Council over the last 3 years. And they've conducted a survey asking questions around their financial well-being, financial stability, mental health and well-being of artists and that. And it really goes to show, you know, to help show what impact arts funding has had on those groups and individuals. As well, the findings that they've released just last month in December, that can be found online, and they have broken out findings into a dashboard setting as well. So you can look at the responses by province if you like, but also by artistic discipline to just get a sense about, you know, some of the financial strain and challenges that artists and arts organizations are facing here in Canada. All right, moving on now to the EAC's survey findings. I'll just provide a little bit of an overview here. We'll be talking about 3 main surveys here: artists, organizations, and public. So beginning with the artist survey, you can see that we've conducted 3 waves of surveys, and the sample size there has risen to its highest level here in 2024. The response rate for artists to each of our waves of surveys is about 50%. So in 2024, that's implying that, you know, we're getting around 1,000 applicants for our individual and collective streams of funding, our equity and access. Really, in the context of a growing city, this kind of shows that, you know, more people are entering into the arts and culture sector as their occupation. Organizations, you might see that there's been a bit of a drop there in 2024. Now, part of that reasoning is that in those first 2 years there, the Arts Presentation Fund was active. So this was a fund provided by the City of Edmonton as a form of economic stimulus in terms of the COVID recovery. So those higher sample numbers, groups that have worked with the EAC, were, more so like say restaurants, pubs, community leagues, organizations that don't really have like a firm arts-based mandate. And so with the conclusion of the Arts Presentation Fund, you can see data here collected in 2024. This is more representative of organizations that have an arts-based mandate. And yeah, the organization response rate is around 70% each year. And now with the public survey, data collection for this occurs every 2 years. And so we'll largely be presenting on the 2024 data, which has a sample of around 1,500 individuals. Now, one of the questions that was raised in the question and answer period was, how is this data collected in that? So I should first just clarify that who is collecting the data for all these surveys is a third party, Advantis, a market research firm. So they do all the administering of the surveys, they do the data collection for us. Now, with respect to the public survey, they do a random probability sample here in Edmonton. So they do call outs to individuals, looking to see if they're interested in participating, through random digit dialing. And then individuals who agree or consent to participate in the survey are sent a link to do so online. So that then means any individual 18 years or older could have been contacted for participation. And that 1,500 number, it's about 20% of a participation rate, because Advantis had contacted over 7,000 individuals in Edmonton. And so, yeah, about 20% responded to the survey. And I should also note that the findings that I'll be presenting on the public survey is also weighted data. So when we're thinking about, how representative is a sample of Edmonton, based on municipal and federal, census data, say if certain groups are maybe overrepresented, data weighting allows, groups that are overrepresented to maybe like kind of fall in line to be more balanced to our population here in Edmonton. Whereas respondents who are, say, that were less captured in the survey, the data weighting can also bring up the strength of their responses, so that we can get a sample that is more representative of Edmonton's true population. And the data weighting does so in terms of age categories, gender, visible minority / racialized group in that. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in the findings here. All right. So yes, I'll begin now with talking about the public survey findings here in Edmonton. Now, the first piece I wanted to discuss here is Edmontonians' perception on the value of the arts. So we have a series of statements on the left there. Respondents are asked to if they strongly or somewhat agree, somewhat disagree, and such. But as you can see that respondents, 80% or more than 4 in 5 respondents, feel that arts and culture makes their community a better place to live. It brings people from diverse backgrounds together as a community, builds a shared sense of community identity, and it is important to your quality of life. So when we're thinking about, the public's perception of the value of the arts, you can see that there's a high agreement that, arts and culture does bring value to the everyday lives of people. But what I want to show you here on the next slide, if we break out the 2024 survey data between men and women, you can see that there on the right, women are consistently agreeing with these statements higher, more so than men. So this implies that, while the majority of Edmontonians agree about the value of the arts, you can see that, women tend to agree with these statements more highly than men. So when thinking about, kind of like the importance of the arts, the value it brings to our culture, it might be men that need a bit more convincing or persuasion, more so than women. Oh, and I just wanted to add that in our sample, we do have individuals responding who are transgendered or non-binary or genders outside of the binary spectrum, but their response rates are too low to be able to make these kinds of comparisons. On this next slide, I'll just kind of describe briefly about the Edmontonians' connection to the arts. So roughly 4 in 10 respondents feel they have a personal connection to the arts here in our city. And as you can see, that's mainly through the attendance of arts or cultural events. Other ways individuals can be connected to the arts is if they're a practitioner, in the sense they could be teaching or a mentor or that kind of thing, through donations, volunteering their time, or being a student or administrator. So there are different areas in the arts and culture sector how individuals in our city can be connected to the arts. On this next slide, I just want to highlight a bit more about Edmontonians' engagement with the arts here. So at the top there, you can see that in 2024, 87% of the sample had attended at least one of these arts and cultural events in the last year. That's up from 64% in 2022. And I should also note that data collected in 2022, that's more, there may have been more restrictions related to COVID in terms of, attending the events, these types of things. There's other disruptions to the industry. But as you can see here, in terms of data collected in 2024, that, attendance to all types of events is up, with music performances and concerts at that top there with about 64%, followed by craft show or fair at 57%, theater, visual art exhibits, film screening, about that 40% mark. We just started tracking Indigenous arts or cultural experiences, 35% there in 2024. And a little bit towards the lower end are comedy performance, dance performance, multimedia kind of exhibits as well, and a book or poetry reading there at 11%. Now, what I want to also just tell you about here, I don't have a separate slide for this, but consistently for each of these types of events, it is women who are reporting higher attendance essentially across the board to all these events. So again, when you're thinking about reaching new audiences, how you might bring some new people in, again, it may be those male audiences that could maybe need a little bit more targeting of that, or again, persuasion to come to these events. Because again, yes, it is women who have been attending live performance or events more so than men in our survey. And on the next slide here, I just want to talk a little bit about audience perceptions or engagement with diverse audiences. So you can see there that between 2022 and 2024, audiences can report that they have seen, artists, performers from visible or ethnocultural minorities, and that's gone up from 36 to 43%. They're also recognizing Indigenous artists. So again, you see that little tick up from 25% to 34%. But it's with respect to deaf persons and persons with disabilities, it's a little bit static at that 8% mark. But the takeaway on this slide here is that audiences in Edmonton are seeing performances, they're attending events by a diverse range of artists with respect to their cultural backgrounds. Continuing on this slide here with Edmontonians' perceptions of the art ecology. On the right here, the first statement asks strongly plus somewhat agree that Edmonton has a strong and vibrant festival scene. And yeah, the moniker of Edmonton being a festival city seems to be, pretty agreeable with people that, 84% in 2024 said Edmonton has a strong and vibrant festival scene. However, when you ask agreement with Edmonton offers great arts and cultural experiences, or if Edmonton has a strong and vibrant arts scene, you can see that there's a little bit lower, it's 70% there for cultural experiences, and maybe 2/3 of respondents think Edmonton has a strong and vibrant arts scene. However, part of the what accounts for those drop in percentages there is a greater proportion of respondents selecting don't know. So this kind of leads to our understanding that, while there's a greater recognition of the festival scene, Edmontonians may need just a little bit more awareness around those cultural experiences, and just thinking about the art scene in general throughout the year. Again, sticking with perceptions of the arts ecology, when we're asking about rating very good or good on the number of overall arts and cultural events, festivals, activities, facilities in the city, it's about 7 and 10 agree. I think it's at a good level. Access to arts and cultural events, festivals, activities, facilities, it's a little bit lower, the access. 2/3 think that the access is good. But what I want to highlight here is the difference when you ask more specifically about Indigenous arts and cultural events, as well as access to Indigenous arts and cultural events. You can see that those numbers drop by quite a bit. Only 39% recognize or think that it's a good rating for Indigenous arts and cultural events and access to those. But again, part of what accounts for those differences between overall events and Indigenous events is a greater proportion I don't know. It's almost like 35% for Indigenous arts and cultural events. So the takeaway here is that while there's an agreement that overall there's a good number of arts and cultural events and access to those here in the city, if you're programming Indigenous events, this may need, more marketing, more awareness to like help create that increase that level of awareness amongst audiences and attendees. And on the next slide here, I just want to highlight some of the barriers to arts and cultural participation that Edmontonians are feeling. And as you can see, the net any barrier, that's almost essentially 4 out of 5 of every respondent experiences some kind of barrier to accessing events. And that the first one being, the activity or event was too expensive at 39%. And what came up in discussion after was we don't really have in this survey information around like those price points between tickets or subscription or that. We just have this general sense that, with the increased cost of living, inflation, the kind of disposable income individuals have, they might be feeling things are getting expensive for this kind of participation. So what I would just recommend here briefly again is checking out the spotlights on audiences report that Stone Olofsson in partnership with Rose Foundation has been conducting. This may give you more insights into, again, that consumer behavior side of arts audiences. Again, looking at the next line there, 39% do not know how to find out about events or activities. So there is a bit of a knowledge or information gap as well. Audiences may be looking to attend events and such, but again, they're saying they're having blind spots in knowing just kind of what's out there. But also important as well is just it is difficult to find time to participate. That's at 37%. So when we're thinking about the time people have available for engagement with the arts, a lot of people are feeling that time crunch and maybe just can't quite get it into their schedules as much as they would like. And again, location was difficult to get to, about 23%. Edmonton being a pretty large city, where audiences are coming from the city to venues, there could be that kind of logistical challenge in that. And just under that, the location or the building was difficult to physically access the site or facilities, excuse me. So there is something that we're monitoring here between, it came up in discussion around this idea of access. So in some sense, a broader challenge might be the access to a location from where a person is coming, but What is also important, but not as seen as highly of a barrier, at least in this survey data, is that access to the facilities themselves. So again, thinking about the kind of inclusive infrastructure, making sure that people don't have barriers once they're at the facility, and that could also be an important thing to consider. And yeah, I'll just move on to the next slide here, just to wrap up kind of these suggestions on removing barriers to the arts. Just at the bottom there, about 1,200 individuals kind of provided some extra kind of written response to this. And you can see at the top, again, kind of mirroring the findings from the last slide. About 1 in 6 respondents saying, make opportunities more affordable. Again, this is pointing to the price sensitivity that individuals may be having. Certainly challenges, again, with inflation, cost of living. The next line, make locations more accessible. So again, yeah, thinking about like that kind of transit, that kind of commuting part of it. And again, provide more information or advertising. Again, we're seeing a little bit of a gap here between what audience is aware of and, kind of when things are being promoted. Just briefly here, some other things pointed out are around crime or security concerns, provide opportunities in different locations. So thinking about how maybe programming could be, put out into different areas of the city. And yeah, just briefly here, I want to highlight, of course, some of these barriers aren't always in our control. So as arts organizations, arts leaders, it's important to think about, what it is in our capacity to change. What are some of these barriers that, we can maybe overcome together as a community to, help bridge connections to arts and cultures, to audiences. And so, yeah, I'll now turn it over to my colleague, Abby Burbank, who will present to you survey findings from the Artists and Organizations survey. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Abby Burbank. I am a research analyst with Edmonton Arts Council. And now that John has walked us through the public survey results, I'm going to go into more detail about the artists and the organization survey results, with a focus on the relationships between artists and organizations in Edmonton. To start off with a bit of context, about half of the artists that we have surveyed have worked with or received support from Edmonton Arts Festival or service organizations in the past 12 months. And for a bit of clarity, when we say service organizations, we mean organizations whose primary mandate is to support artists. So thinking of organizations like CARFAC or Writers Guild, things of that nature. So we can see that 37% of artists reported working with arts organizations, 23% have worked with festivals, and 9% have worked with art service organizations in the past 12 months. And the type of work or support that they receive includes a lot of things related to the creation and production of artistic work. So 57% of artists reported receiving that kind of support. Another 38% noted that collaborating, demonstrating, or sharing ideas was a form of support that they received, and other things kind of along those lines. Now, I did want to just point out that 34% of the artists reported having attended a mentorship, training, residencies, or workshop sessions in the past 12 months. And I want to flag this one in particular because this was one of the measures that the EAC looked at when looking at how we could best support dancers in the Edmonton arts community, because it turns out that dancers have reported receiving more of this kind of support than any other artistic discipline. So when you do fill out these surveys, it really does help us inform the decisions that we make as an organization. When we look at this from an organization perspective, we can get a better sense of how organizations see their input to the surveying artists in the community. So 81% support performers or presenters to show their artistic works, 62% to offer mentorship, training, or residencies, and then in the mid-60s for collaborating, demonstrating, sharing ideas, supporting creation, or producing individual artistic works, and supporting arts workers. So this gives us a sense of kind of where the organizations are contributing their energy into the Edmonton arts community. When we ask artists about their satisfaction when working with organizations, overall, artists are generally pretty satisfied. 92% in 2024 have been at least somewhat or very satisfied when working with arts organizations. So those are very strong numbers. When we ask about specific services, the services and supports that they received, again, very high, 87% are satisfied. The feedback, 84% are satisfied. And then coming in just a little bit lower is the compensation that artists have received from organizations, coming in at 79%. And when we look at these questions from an organization standpoint instead, we can see the same kind of trend of data where, or trend of answers, where the organizations are responding that they are very satisfied with the artists that they work with. Look at that in 2024 with 99% being satisfied with their artists. Another 93% happy with the services and supports, 91% satisfied with the feedback, but even with organizations and their generally more positive sentiment in the survey answers, the question about compensation is just a little bit lower at 85% being satisfied. So that's a very similar spread to what we saw when we looked at the answers from artists. And this tells us that the artists and the organizations both perceive a little bit of tension when it comes to the compensation factor of working together. And so one of the questions in our survey is allows artists to write in free form about their experiences working with arts and festival organizations in the city. And generally what we find is that artists are very appreciative of arts organizations. They value their contributions to the Edmonton arts ecology, and they're empathetic to the financial constraints of organizations. So if we look at this first quote, this person believes that Edmonton has a world-class festival scene, and that organizations are doing the best that they can to financially support artists in the city. The second person there says that they love working with festivals and getting to showcase their work with them, and that the pay isn't great. Again, that compensation's perspective, but they love the experience in this case and the opportunity to show their work with a large audience. And so this kind of was seen throughout many of the verbatim responses, where artists had kind of a equation, I guess, in their heads for when they would work with organizations. And the positive sentiment that artists have towards organizations can go a really long way in whether or not they choose to partake in the event or festival that is being put on. Because if the compensation is lower than we've seen in other places, that organizational relationship with them can really be the factor in whether or not they choose to participate and whether they have a good time or not. And then this third point here says, any stressors or difficulties I've had as a presenting artist were the direct result of festival organization staff having to downsize, reprioritize, pivot, and scramble due to reduced or lost funding. So again, it's really this acknowledgement that everybody is kind of doing the best that they can, given the limited and static funding structures that we are all working within the Edmonton arts ecology. When we look at comments specific to compensation, there were themes of broad themes of challenges with payment models and services to performers. So again, there's a lot of that sentiment that there's just not enough money to provide jobs and access to artists, but everybody's kind of doing the best that they can. One person noted a bit of a difference in their perception from post-pandemic to pre-pandemic experiences. And then another person noted that this third quote here, that organizations are paying as much as they can, but there's still quite a lot of work that they are asked to do to participate in festivals or events, and that when it all shakes out at the end of the day, the amount of time required works out to minimum wage or just slightly above, and that they don't find this in keeping with their time or expertise. And this was particularly seen in comments from people who work as a group or a collective in their artistic practice. So thinking of musical like bands or dancers, things where maybe there's a set fee for participation in the event, but it has to be divided amongst like 5 people, for instance, which means that that money really doesn't go very far. So one approach to that we can see in that fourth quote that says pay transparency is also very important. Festivals that receive public money should have to be more transparent about what they pay artists. So this goes back to that relationship point that we talked about in the previous slide, where the artists have a perception of how this payment structure works, but whether or not that aligns with what your organization's actually practicing is a different thing. So if you are looking to like build and maintain good relationships with your artists, you may want to consider some pay transparency on your websites or in the materials leading up to events so that artists are all on the same page about how you're approaching the payment structures, so that it's clear and accurate and you're controlling that message. And then finally, the last quote says that festivals seem a bit inaccessible due to low fees for artists. So this person perceives the low fee scenarios as being an accessibility issue where maybe they would like to participate, but they simply can't afford to. Another theme of comments that we saw in the verbatim responses is the desire for additional opportunities for connection with the arts community. So this came in particularly for new artists, or new to Edmonton artists or emerging artists. Where there is a real appetite for mentoring experiences, or like we see in the second and third quote there, where the opportunities are available to speak with people from the Edmonton arts community, but that these people are really looking for a closer, deeper connection or a more meaningful connection to feel more invited into the arts community. So if you are planning for networking events or things that connect artists with each other, this may be something to consider, is how we can consider the experiences of emerging or new to Edmonton artists. And if we look at these sentiments from other measures in the survey, because, you know, a quote is one person's opinion, but it does really show in other areas of the survey as well. So only 59% of artists said that they had sufficient opportunities to interact, gather, share ideas, and learn from the local arts community. Only 51 said that they had sufficient opportunities to receive knowledgeable, constructive feedback. And then again, down at the bottom there, we see that only 37 and 39% thought that there were enough sufficient or virtual platforms for artistic communication within the local arts community. And granted, those last two measures had a large number of don't know responses, indicating that people just don't feel confident in their knowledge of platforms for interaction. But all of these numbers really paint the picture of artists needing additional opportunities to interact with each other, gather feedback, and really form those closer connections. And to the physical space consideration. So as many of you may know, the Edmonton Arts Council has recently come out with a 2025 to 2027 funding strategy, which is available on our website if you want more additional information about that. But One of the aspects of that is to support arts facilities that are accessible and available for use of multiple artists. And part of this came from the survey responses. So we saw that 26% of artists have experienced a shortage or inability to access space or equipment in the past year. So this really, knowing when we were developing the funding strategy that there were lots of places that the EAC could go with that strategy and a lot of things that they could prioritize. The people responsible for that outside the research team really gathered up those pieces of kind of community knowledge and things that we have heard and acknowledgement of where we are as an organization, and then looked at the survey results for confirmation about whether or not that would be an impactful change. And in the case of space considerations, as we can see with 26% of artists, that's 1 in 4 experiencing a shortage of space or equipment in the past year, that would be an impactful thing to consider for the funding strategy. So again, just to say that when you do fill out the surveys, we take all of this information very seriously, and we're so appreciative of the time that you commit to helping us with this. And then there's additional feedback about artists experiencing barriers in accessing available services and opportunities just through a lack of awareness. So this top quote here that says, "I'm not sure if my community is so far removed from that we simply don't know about the resources to support. However, I would like to know more about them. It is hard with my artistic community because many of us work a lot of hours to supplement our income in our artistic practices. It's hard to dedicate time to learn more about the resources." So this person's particular discipline was redacted just for privacy concerns, but it is a sentiment that relates to a lot of experiences for different artistic disciplines within the city, where we simply don't know about all of the things that may be available to us, but the barrier to actually finding out about them can be the time and energy required to do that, because from our surveys, we also know that most artists are working additional jobs in addition to their practice, and sometimes multiple jobs, like 3 or 4. So that time consideration is a real factor. And that's something that we saw a lot as well when we were looking at the Stone Olafson reports, is that the amount of time people have in the week is often the greater barrier than anything else. So one approach can be seen in that second quote, where organizations may choose to address this, where if the services that you're offering are similar to that of another organization, you could potentially reach out to your fellow organizations and propose like a partnership or reciprocity type of situation, where if somebody comes in, you inform that person of the other organizations that are also doing similar work or complementary work, so that they are burdened less with having to find things on their own. And then the third comment there says, "I wish it was more advertised and inclusive." And the inclusivity factor is something that the EAC cares very much about. The Edmonton Arts Council has a commitment to inclusion, diversity, equity, and access that is embedded in the Connections and Exchanges plan. This is partnered, of course, with the Indigenous principle that has its own considerations as well. And so to that end, last year we asked organizations whether or not they had worked with any people who identify as Indigenous or as a member of an equity-seeking group. And so on the right, we can see the breakdown of the different groups that people are working with. So 90% of organizations have worked with an artist who identifies in one of these categories. So 76% of organizations have reported working with Indigenous artists. Racialized artists come in at 68%, LGBTQ 64%, and so on. And so as you're working with the EAC, and if we ask you about anything relating to equity seeking, these are some of the categories that we're thinking of, is everything under Indigenous peoples there would be considered equity seeking in its own right. So this is also just to say that as we saw in John's portion of the presentation, artists are audiences are very much choosing to go to events where the artists presenting are Indigenous or equity seeking in some way. And so this really shows the diversity and the strength of the Edmonton Arts ecology is the great variety of artists that are working in our city. That said, there were some additional pieces of verbatim feedback where artists from either Indigenous or equity-seeking groups have shared some of their experiences of working with organizations. So this person at the first quote there says, "I've provided countless hours of free labor, i.e. Zoom calls, to organizations looking for reconciliation or decolonization. I prep for these meetings with cultural guidance from elders and advisors. It takes hours of prep work before the meeting to be prepared with cultural information. More often than not, I leave the meeting feeling that I have been appropriated and am paying my elders out of pocket for their time and knowledge." So this individual spends a great deal of time prior to meeting with organizations to build their own knowledge. They pay their elders out of pocket, so they're paying in time, money, emotional labor, all of these things to work with organizations, and then coming away with it feeling drained and appropriated in their own words. And so this is just a call to organizations to be really mindful when you go to work with Indigenous communities, to know what you are requesting from community and be really considerate about that. So if you are looking to work with Indigenous communities more as an organization, you're welcome to reach out to the Edmonton Arts Council's Indigenous Relations Advisor. Her name is Kyra Brown. And her contact information is on our website, and she'll be happy to kind of steer you in the right direction to make sure that you're working with Indigenous communities in a genuine and respectful way. And this was seen again in that second quote that says, "The experience always varies because it depends on the values established and upheld by their board members. Some are great at follow through, and some definitely do it just for show and don't genuinely care about community impacts." So again, we're seeing that relationship with organizations is a really key part for artists engaging with organizations and festivals and events. And that when an organization is pursuing inclusion, diversity, equity, and access in a really genuine way, it is felt versus doing it more for show or as a box ticking exercise. So if we go on to this third quote, we can then see that this person is doing a call for organizations to be considerate of the changing demographic overall in Edmonton and just the great diversity that exists in the city. This person particularly is an Asian artist and would like to see additional programming related to their particular heritage, which is fair and great. But this is just included to say that in your efforts to have a genuine efforts towards inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, you can look at the great many groups that were included on that last slide under equity seeking, and chances are you are already working with artists who identify in one of those identities. So really understanding the variety of ways that you as an organization can pursue idea in a really genuine way. So the last figure that I'll throw at you here is just general perceptions of the Edmonton arts ecology. So when we ask artists and organizations whether they think that Edmonton is a good place to be an artist, 71% of artists and 85% of organizations have agreed that Edmonton is a good place to be an artist. And if we ask if Edmonton has a culturally diverse and inclusive art scene, 79 or 75% of 74% of artists agree, and 96% of organizations agree with that statement. So despite some of the more challenging aspects of working as an artist in the city that we've dove into a little bit on some of the previous slides, the general perception of being an artist in Edmonton is a positive one. So some of the key takeaways from our presentation today is that overall, Edmontonians value the benefits that arts and culture bring to communities. We saw like 87% of people have attended an event in the past year, and that's a really strong showing of support. In general, respondents believe that Edmonton's festival and art scene are strong and vibrant. Audiences are attending performances and events presented by artists from diverse backgrounds. And the barriers to participating in arts and cultural activities are complex, but there are still things that are within our control to affect. In the Artists and Organizations survey, we saw that artists and organizations have been satisfied in working with each other, although compensation can still be an area of strain. Professional development opportunities for artists are valued, but perceived as limited, and maybe the structure of them could be adjusted to form closer connections between people who attend. Organizations work with artists from diverse backgrounds. We saw that overwhelming support with 90% of artist organizations. And Edmonton is viewed as a good place to be an artist. So the last thing I will leave you with is that the Edmonton Arts Council conducts these surveys on an annual basis, and currently the 2025 survey is out in the field for people to respond to. So if you were invited to respond to the survey, please do so by February 13th, 2025. And to reiterate, your responses are completely anonymous and will be stored securely with the research team. And they will never, ever be used in assessments. So the anonymity is even on the research team, we don't see who responds to what questions. And then there's that greater area of separation where even the things that we see don't get shared directly with members from the EAC. So again, your responses will never be associated with your funding. And so you can be completely honest and know that we're just using these responses to guide our own behavior. And our responses to needs of the community and to advocate with City Council. So thank you very much for watching this recording of our presentation. If you have any questions or comments, or you just want to talk to John and I more about research or get connected to additional EAC resources, don't hesitate to reach out. We have a research email at research@edmontonarts.ca, or if you have a more general question for the EAC, you can contact us at info@edmontonarts.ca. So thank you so much for your time, and take care.